you're in for a good time when you hear that sound, because it means it's time for
Have you?
another episode of the Rec Poker Podcast Forums Edition with production quality unmatched in the poker podcast sphere. We are peerless when it comes to our production quality. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm your host Jim Reed, and if you want to learn more about me, just like all the other wizards on the Wrecking Crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew and see all about all of us. Every week, we take a post from the Rec Poker forums. And because I have the best job in the world, I get to bring it here with some of these panelists and some of our premium members at Rec Poker and talk about that post, get into some of the nitty gritty details of strategy and the world of poker in a recreational mindset. A couple of folks that help us out with that are website Mark, who owns Website Amp, which is one of our sponsors. And thank you, Mark, for all that you do to make Rec Poker great. And of course, Steve Fredlin's Mecca, Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. Speaking of peerless in the poker world. So every week, I'm joined by members of the Wrecking Crew. It's a rotating group. This week, we've got Chris and John. Gentlemen, why don't you tell the world where they can find you?
Well, I'm Chris Jones. You can find me on 5x5 on PokerStars and Twitter.
And I'm John Somsky. Currently, you can find me in my office recording this. Oh, you put him at Poker Geek MN on everywhere.
And he's in his office working on Rec Poker stuff a lot. John Somsky is the online home games director for Rec Poker. So it's him that you've got to thank for the over 40 free home games that we do every month. And Chris is the membership content director. So you've got him to thank for our monthly seminar, the focus, and a lot of the learning material that we put out here at Rec Poker. Speaking of the home game, we're all playing in the nightly home. Well, I'm not. These guys are playing in the nightly home game. I don't have the mental capacity to do that and host a podcast at the same time. But we're trying to steal each other's chips. We are going to take a look today at a post in the Rec Poker forums by ImaLouigi. ImaLouigi has been posting in here a few times. We've had some great responses to other people's posts, which is what we really like when members start sharing their thoughts on other people's posts and sharing their knowledge and experience with the group. That's how we all get better, by contributing to each other's poker journey. So, ImaLouigi wants to talk about ICM spots. And so there are two situations that he's put in the post here. I'm just going to go through it and then we can talk amongst the group. So the first, we're 4 left in the entire tournament from 644 runners. We've already got something locked up, or is it blah, blah, blah? Is it 3 paid or is it 4 paid, guys? Sorry.
Looks like it's 4 paid.
I think it's 4 paid. So we're in the money.
Well, at least 4 paid. I mean, I think yeah. Mean, he's locked up at least 2,800 here.
Yeah, he mentions the payouts available. So it's 2,800. That's right. 3,800, 5,700, and 9,200. So we've got 2,800 locked up, and there are some payout jumps available. This is an ACR tournament online. So the chip leader has 80 big blinds and has been open jamming for 2 orbits since we went 4-handed, because Hero and the 2 remaining short stacks all have 11 to 14 big blinds. So this is a dynamic we're all going to be familiar with as tournament players. When you get short-handed like this, and there's such a huge chip stack disparity, it's a real advantage to the large stack player, because they can just shove and shove and shove, and you're just not going to feel comfortable calling enough to really realize your equity in that spot. So this is a pretty, if you play enough tournaments, you're going to be in this spot, either as the big stack or as the small stack. And I think there's some lessons here for both. So in this case, villain shoves under the gun, and it folds around to Hero ImaLouigi in the small blind with King of Hearts and Queen of Hearts. So ImaLouigi says, I'm obviously crushing his range, but with ICM considerations, are we better off waiting to be able to force villain to call our shove, and or waiting to let the 2 other opponents battle with him? It's an unusual situation because we have 3 people with near identical stacks and a villain with an enormous chip lead. We're not realistically playing to win the tournament anymore. We're trying to maximize EV and ladder up. And I think that's a really good insight here, because, I mean, whether you're trying to win the tournament or not, there's value in laddering up. And so part of your decision is going to be weighing the value of laddering up versus weighing the value of trying to win the tournament. And that's kind of what ICM is all about. And I think what makes it kind of unusual is that of the four players, 3 have a very similar stack size. If the stack sizes were more disparate, this would actually be an easier problem, because if you're the second in chips and there's 2 real short stacks, there's a real incentive for you to just stay out of the way. But when everyone has a similarly short stack, you don't have that much to lose by being the 4th out instead of the 3rd out, because you're not really entitled to any more, EV of the. You're not entitled to any more of that pot that you would be otherwise. That pool.
Or likewise, if one of the players if it was 11, 11, and 5 big blinds, the 5 big blind player should be just getting it in there willy nilly, because that player has so much less equity for it.
Yeah. And that's something that I think people don't really understand when they're playing in these spots. But if you are the short stack here, I mean, this is kind of like this is a fun part of poker. Like, you actually just get to be the one exerting the pressure and putting your chips in. And, you're always rooting for a fold, but this is poker, folks. And even when you get called, you're never going to be dead in the water. So this is a spot where, again, in this particular place that ImaLouigi is talking about, it's a great spot for analysis, because this isn't so cookie cutter simple as some of those other situations. So in this spot, King of Hearts, Queen of Hearts, I mean, a pretty good hand. What do we think about this? Chris, John, you're in this spot. What does it make you feel?
Grumpy.
Grumpy.
So if you look at the payouts, it's 2,800 for 4th, 3,800 for 3rd, and then 57 for 2nd. So there's really not a huge difference between the 2nd or 3rd and 4th. You get a little bit more of a bump to get up to 2nd. So I don't know. To me, I would be inclined to try to really shoot for that 2nd spot. So I'd be looking for a spot to double up. Not that that's what all the short stacks are looking for. But you don't want to wait too long so that you blind yourself down and then you're just doubling back to where you were a few orbits ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I would probably be inclined to take this spot, but I think that might be one of the potential leaks in my game, is that I do not take ICM into enough consideration. So, but in general, in this spot, I would probably go for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those where it, if I am playing my very best, I'm probably folding this, because I think this is probably a hand that we can fold. And if we're gonna be calling, I'd much rather do it with some kind of an ace or something that's going to be clearly ahead of, this is already clearly ahead of, if this player is actually open jamming for 2 orbits, I mean, they're opening really wide and they're jamming really wide. But at the same time, we're in ICM jail here, and that is what's making me grumpy and probably folding. But I will say, like, sometimes I get fed up with these spots, and I'm like, okay, I'm sick of it, and I've got a good hand, and I'm going to go with it here. Let's go. And I know I guess that's a leak in my game too. Like, I get sick of these bullies, and but so if I'm playing my best, I think this is a fold. I think we should be folding. But I'm not sure that in game that I actually do enough.
Yeah, I think that's a common experience, I think. And I'm exactly the same way. I'm exactly the same way. Because I get like some tilt stuff where I'm like, I want people to like not get away with stuff.
Yeah, right. It's this injustice tilt that I have. Like,
right,
this is so wrong. I know you're doing this with like 4-7 sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
but the other part
ridiculous.
of your brain is thinking, "Oh, I wish I were that guy."
Yeah.
That looks like a lot of fun what he's
That's
doing
right.
right there.
And that's part of it, right, guys? Because it's like they're not just doing it because they have some magical talisman at home that lets them shove all the time. They're doing it because it's advantageous for them and correct to do so. And like
Mhm.
the reason Chris is grumpy isn't because he like doesn't have the chutzpah to call this person. It's because folding is the correct play. It's because the structure of the game is set up that no, grudgingly folding is going to be the right play a lot.
Mhm.
Um, and it's not because that big stack is a better player. It's not because they're you know cooler or stronger than anybody else. It's just that they have the big stack, and the way you exploit it is when you have the big stack, getting the leverage out of that yourself, and when you don't, playing appropriately for the role that you have. We'd all love to have the big stack, but when we don't, we have to play appropriately.
And
Yeah,
counting on your opponent. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say it's no different than, when you're under the gun, you play a tighter range than when you're on the button. That's because the situation dictates that.
I love that, John.
It's the exact same situation here. It just feels a little bit, it feels less fair because over the course of an orbit, you will be on the button once. Over the course of several tournaments, are you going to be the big stack at a final table? Maybe, maybe not. And that's where your skill edge earlier in the tournament hopefully got you to the final table with the bigger stack so that you can be the one everyone else is grumbling about instead of the one that has to fold the hand you don't want to fold.
That is such a good point, John. If our friend Merv Harvey from the Post Flop Poker Podcast was here, I would make sure that he awarded you the medal, or was it the award? The award of the episode, the medal of the episode, whatever it is. You earned it for
I
that
think
one.
it was a medal.
I think it is the medal. So thanks, Murph. We're totally appropriating that, by the way. Okay, moving on. So I think that's so important, John. That notion that I think that is that we kind of feel like we're entitled to it every once in a while in the way that we are entitled to the button every once in a while, but that's not actually true. And your point about playing better earlier in the tournament, that's so key. And it's, as recreational players, we think like, okay, we made it through the bubble, we've like succeeded in this venture that we were in, which was like playing this tournament. But that's winning the battle and not the war. And you got to focus on winning the war, and that means losing some battles earlier in the tournament, but you got to roll the dice and capitalize those opportunities so that you are the big stack. You get to take advantage of this terrain, um, and lay this waste to your opponents the way that the unnamed villain is doing here. So, okay, so I have two questions, Wizards. So the first is, given that everyone else is also correctly folding all the time, given the dynamic, is there a way that we can adjust our play to take advantage of that? So let's say that this guy is open shoving for 2 orbits, and we think that the other players are just going to actually overfold as a consequence. Is there a course of action available to us to exploit that, or is it we're kind of handcuffed by the situation? Chris, you're shaking your head. Talk to
Yeah,
me
I
about
mean
it.
we're in jail. We're in ICM jail, and um, we're just waiting for somebody to either for us to get an even better hand than this. Like this is a borderline one, king queen suited. I think we can probably call like with ace 10 suited, something like that. Um, so we're getting really close to but I think this is still a fold. And I think what we're hoping is that somebody else, that this dynamic needs to change, right? We either need to pick up a better hand,
Mm-hmm.
or somebody else needs to take a stand, get sick of it, get grumpy,
Well,
whatever, or pick up a premium. And you know, chips are going to shuffle. Somebody's going to get knocked out, or somebody's going to, that this log jam of us all with 11 to 14 is going to unsettle itself. And
there
then we can
will
start
be
making more chances.
there will be a time though when you have position on the bully. Um, And if this player is a thinking player, he is going to be more likely not to call when you shove. I mean, if I were in his situation, I would want to be keeping the small stacks as close as possible for as long as possible, because that's just going to let you continue to exert the maximum ICM pressure. So I think the real way to combat it, realizing that your opponents are also facing the same ICM pressure, assuming it looks like everyone understands that, then when you're first to act, raise all in, and you can even raise a little bit lighter, because everyone involved should be more hesitant to call because of the same ICM pressure you're facing.
Yeah, that I like that. I think that's exactly correct. And I think one of the real keys of this is that it's the dynamic that's handcuffing us here. It's the dynamic. It's the spot that we're in. As Chris says, if someone else doubles up, let's just say no one else gets booted, but someone else doubles up, that changes the dynamic because now there's only 2 short stacks instead of 3 short stacks. It changes the pressure that is on you. It changes the pressure that's on the other players. And I'd much rather be sitting. If you told me that I had 11 to 14 big blinds, I'd rather be in a situation where like my role was clarified on the table because I'm going to feel less handicapped or less handcuffed because the only solution is to start raising yourself instead or to get a really good hand and call. So that's kind of hard to do.
Yeah, I would open shove this if it was,
Yeah,
before the bully got to act.
right.
But I'm not going to call with it.
That's a great point, and it's too bad that the layout on the table isn't better for ImaLouigi here because it sounds like he's across the table from the villain four-handed, so he's not going to get that many situations where he's out of the hand and he gets to act. But that would be ideal. That would be another way to change the dynamic of the spot a little bit. Would be at least if the bully is to your right, every hand they don't enter, including their big blind, you can shove, and then put them in that more awkward position. So, our newest Wrecking Crew member, Kim Pet Vet, is in the chat here, and she was putting some notes up in our conversation here. And it sounds like these cusp hands that we're talking about that you would be in this situation to call with are suited aces and sevens plus. You need that ace or a made hand, and even then, she says, I wouldn't hate the call there. but but it is the difference between ace x and king queen isn't so much the absolute hand strength so much as the hands that you're ahead of and the hands that you're behind. When you've got king queen, you're just behind every ace, and that makes a difference when you're looking at the combos of how you're trying to get involved. I mean, bad aces are also dominated by a lot of those, but
Yeah.
it's different. So Chris and John, what are some of the hands that we might call in this spot? Is Kim kind of nailed it there with the suited ace X and 7/7 plus? I mean, I obviously, well, not obviously, I guess. I mean, there's some non-suited aces like ace king that we might consider.
Yeah. I'm probably even a little tighter in this spot. I'm not doing this with every suited ace, so I'm probably doing it suited ace 9 or 10, and then ace queen plus, and probably I think I think a pocket eights for me, I think is I might find a call with sevens. They would be
and
I would be like, oh god, I hate everything.
and when you say that, Chris, you mean that you'd call with aces, kings, queens, all the way down to sevens, and then also pocket fives and nothing else.
Nope, pocket fives. Pocket fives are going in the muck right now. Again, they got us in.
Oh, pocket fives, cover your ears. He didn't
Yeah,
mean it. He didn't
yeah,
mean it.
no. They're going straight in the muck.
As they should be.
No, this is why this situation gets you so grumpy, because
Yeah.
you can't even play your premium hands.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's it. It's a bad spot. It's a bad spot to be in. But that doesn't mean that like just throw it all away. It just means make tougher, less pleasant decisions, and that's part of poker. It'll be your turn to be the big stack one of these days. So I want to mention, so Taylor Moss, who couldn't be here tonight, did put a response into the forum post here. And he says, honestly, it feels really bad, but if they're shoving every hand, we still need to have a really good hand to call with all the ICM pressure in this spot. The decision really comes down to how wide is our opponent in this spot. I ran ICMizer and they said that under the gun would shove around 50% of hands, and we should only call ace 10 suited, nines plus, and ace jack offsuit plus. If I widen their range to top 80% of hands, then we can call with king queen suited, king jack suited, ace 8 to ace 9 suited, and ultimately I'd wait until other spots and be way more open to shove when we are under the gun or the button, when we would be able to act before this big stack. So so kind of in line with as we described here, shoving's better than calling always. And I think we're right on that borderline of sort of where the cusp hands are. And I think a lot of that comes down to the actual range that you put your opponent on. A lot of this stuff is really just a math problem. If you can get good at hand ranging and figuring out equities, some of this stuff you're just going to say, okay, well, he's shoving 60%. That means that I can shove, I can call with ace 9 plus and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I suppose I mean, that is interesting. If for Taylor's point of view, if we can raise this up to 80% of hands, maybe king queen. The thing that I don't love about this is this has only been 2 orbits, and we can make some assumptions that villain is just doing this with anything, right? But it's also like,
And to be clear, 2 orbits is 8 hands.
right,
Thank
it's only
you.
that's
Yes,
my
exactly,
point, right? Like there's 4 people in this, there's 8 hands, so like sometimes people just get dealt a lot of good hands, and they're the chip leader bully, and so like if I saw this happening for 6 orbits, now I'm starting to be thinking my king queen looks pretty enticing. But I don't know.
And people are going to say like 8 hands, like no one gets dealt 8 hands in a row that you can shove with. And maybe that's not true, but maybe that's true. But that doesn't count the big blind hand that he didn't have to play.
Right.
So it's really just 6 out of 8 hands. And for all he decided to bluff shove for 2 or 3 of those hands and then went on a heater. So
Right.
it's really just 3 hands that he had in a row that were good hands.
Right. And it's not even just that he has to have super premium. I mean, what Taylor was talking about is that we cannot call if he's doing this with 50% of his range.
Right.
So like that's down to like queen 7 offsuit, right? And we still cannot call. But what we need him to be doing is doing this with like 9-5 offsuit, right? Like it's got to be that bad of a shove, and then we can start calling with this kind of a hand. And so I'm not convinced seeing 2 orbits I mean, it probably includes queen 8 offsuit for sure, but I don't know that it includes 9-5 offsuit, and that's where I'm probably folding it.
I love Kim's response in the chat. She says 2 orbits is enough online, in my opinion. No chance he beats king queen suited for 2 orbits.
I mean, that's true, but again, we're playing against a range, right? And if we can't narrow this player down to even that level of like better than or worse than 50% of hands, then we've got to fold, and I don't think we can yet.
We'd have to actually do the math with standard deviations and all that stuff. I'll ask you to do that live here right now.
We're not doing it live.
Thanks.
We're not doing it live on the air.
Thanks.
But because that's what you'd really have to do. You'd say, okay, what are the chances that he's doing it with a 40% range, a 30% range, an 80% range? Because we know if we get up to 80%, we're good. It's probably 70 or 65. Who knows where the actual line is? But the thing is in poker, it's a game of incomplete information, and the only information you have is your best guess. That's all you're going to get. Mm-hmm. So you just kind of have to. I mean, if this were a live game, I'd be sizing the player up and seeing what I thought. If I had any past experience, I'd be using that. Against some people, I would definitely call with this. Against others, I probably wouldn't.
Yeah,
that's just.
Well,
does Jonathan Little have anything to say about this, you think?
What a great question. He really knows what he's talking about. Let's see if he has anything to weigh in on with this.
You ever wondered whether you should call a preflop raise or 3-bet instead? What do you do when you have a flush draw? Do you raise it or do you just call? What do you do with ace king when you miss the flop? Are you tired of guessing about what the right play is with your particular hand? Well, my name is Jonathan Little, and I am a 2-time World Poker Tour champion and creator of PokerCoaching.com, where we offer over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where you play a hand and then get real-time feedback from our world-class pros. Don't guess and don't stress. Just register for your free account at PokerCoaching.com/recpoker right now.
And if he hears that any of you have been stressing, it's going to be a problem. Jonathan Little is going to show up at your house and saying, "Have you been sweating or stressing? Because I heard that there was some sweating and stressing going on here, and it's going to be a problem." You're going to hear from. You do not want to make Jonathan Little angry. I would go to pokercoaching.com and enter the code RecPoker like immediately, just for the sake of yourself and the safety of your family. So that is one very common spot, but ImaLouigi did mention two situations. The second one's not going to come up as often, so I don't think we'll have as much to say about it. Is there anything we should cover in that first situation before we move on? No, I think that's right. It's just you got handcuffed to the spot. Suck it up, play disciplined poker for a while, and the dynamic will change, and then you can play a different kind of poker. So situation two. There's 11 left and 10 pay in a $200 entry tournament on ACR, and the hero is 5th of 11 remaining with 22 big blinds. So we're on the actual bubble, and there are 3 micro stacks with fewer than 4 big blinds trying to survive one more orbit. The chip leader has started open jamming since we got one from the money, again, as they should, because that is a spot that it's great to put other people in. So it doesn't make them cool. It doesn't make them like strong or a good poker player. Just they're recognizing that they're in a good spot. So villain jams 50 big blinds, and all the micro stacks have folded. Hero is sitting there with ace ace. So we only have 15 seconds left in the time bank, and we have to make a decision very quickly. Should we ever be folding ace ace pre for ICM considerations? And then ImaLouigi says, silly side note, Hero folded ace ace pre-flop on the stone cold money bubble of the WSOP main event in 2019, which received some coverage on ESPN and some teasing from his poker friends. But it was the right play for sure. And I don't think ImaLouigi is saying that this is a similar spot to that from an ICM consideration point of view, but I'm sure that was in his mind as he came up on the stone cold bubble. And I mean, the short answer is yes, there are times when folding ace ace pre-flop is not only justifiable, but I mean, just absolutely case closed, the right decision. The stone cold bubble is pretty much the spot for that. Is this that spot? I'm not sure, because given the dynamic at play, there's a few different ways we could be thinking about it. I mean,
Let
I
me
have a
ask
notion in mind, but yeah, John.
that question, because so before thinking about this hand, I would have said the only time I would ever fold ace ace pre-flop is in a satellite tournament where you're all you need to do is get into the money. There is no benefit towards getting more chips. And the same might be true if you had a really flat payout structure. But if you have a normal payout structure and the and caching is not going to be bankroll changing. So that makes the main event situation different, because often people are satelliting into the main event, and even getting a min cash of $15,000 is a big boost to your bankroll. So that's a different situation than this. In this, I don't know that caching is worth. I don't know that you're gaining enough extra equity by folding ace ace there than you are gaining if you play a doubled up stack properly after the bubble, including the amount of times that you're going to bust and never get a chance to play at all. So I personally would not be folding ace ace here. Again, I keep in mind that I on average probably don't take enough ICM consideration into it. But that's the way I would look at it with normal tournament payout structures. I kind of think you're still getting enough benefit from the extra chips you're getting, and ace ace is strong enough that you're likely enough to win extra chips that it's still worth putting your chips in the middle in a non um what's satellite tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's very few online tournaments where I would fold ace ace pre-flop. It would have to be it would have to be I mean, like, and I've actually, so I know a little bit about the background of that story from ImaLouigi. I don't know if I know his name, but I don't know if he wants us to use his real name. So from ImaLouigi and his story in that main event, and I've heard the story behind that hand, and I think it's absolutely the right play that he made, and that's the situation to do it. He had, a decent number of blinds, but not a ton. But he can sort of, this is a spot where there's so many people who are just hanging on for dear life. I mean, it's sort of the same situation here, but I think we're talking about a prestige level tournament and sort of wanting to find that cash, and it's a lot of money. Plus, there's just like the main event it's a big tournament, so it's got a really flat payout structure. So once you get into the money, you can start to sort of get your money in and try to double up then. So it makes sense in that spot, but I don't know that there's any kind of online tournament that comes close for me to, and with I want to try to win this one, and I've got 22 big blinds. I can get 46 or 7 by the end of this hand if I jam this, and you know I'm a big favorite to double. And so 20% of the time I'm out. Um, oh well, I'm getting the money in.
Yeah. Then Stu in the chat makes a good point here. If you're going to fold ace ace, then don't even look at your cards. Yeah, that's right. And you'll know if you're in that spot where you just don't even really need to look at your cards, like that satellite situation that John's talking about. And I think, and I do encourage people, we kind of go through the comments here on the podcast, but I encourage you, go get a free community account at rec.poker and go just check out the forum post itself. It's called Two Interesting ICM Spots, including AA on the Bubble. And there's some good notes in here that you just don't get from the audio version. So I always encourage people to go and check it out. But the one point I really want to get at here is this notion that the value of your doubling up on the bubble of the main event is different than the value of your doubling up when there's 10 people left in the tournament, as John and Chris have said, because the payout structure is different. Doubling up in the main event one spot before the bubble doesn't really affect your chances of winning the tournament. Doubling up on the bubble of a 10-person pay bubble may substantially affect your ability to win the tournament. So that's one important distinction there. And then I guess one last question for the panel here. So we're calling with ace ace. Is there room in our calling range there for some other hands? Would we call with king king? Would we call with ace king suited? Or is this just one of those just super unique spots where it's actually just ace ace that we're calling in that spot?
I'm probably calling with kings too, but that might be with this number of micro stacks. That's probably
Mm-hmm.
the bottom for me.
It's the
I
micro
might
stacks. Yeah,
I
John.
might do ace king suited as well, but
Mm-hmm.
those would be the 3 hands I would play.
It's the micro stacks that really make it interesting to me. And ImaLouigi refers to this in the post as well, that because they're all so close to busting, it just makes it a very interesting question where, just like in the previous hand, the dynamic was interesting. Just now, the dynamic's interesting for a similar reason, stack sizes, but the dynamic is very, very different. So that's a good thing to be thinking about. And Kim in the chat says that she would call with queens plus and ace king. And yeah, I mean that's a pretty strong range. So, but the ace king is one of those hands where you're flipping with all their pairs, and you're not that far ahead of some of their other ones. But I mean, you're dominating a lot of their other aces that they're raising with, so that's good. And it really does depend on like what are your assumptions about this player, how tight can you make that opening range prediction, and go from there.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for this great conversation about ICM and the different ways that it can be expressed. Um, my tip for listeners: be the big stack. Apparently, that's a huge edge. If you can master that, just be like a tremendously favored big stack every time you get to a final table. You're going to find those final tables are much easier to play, way more smooth, fewer
And then do
embarrassing
this a lot
errors.
to put people in these
That
kinds
just
of
keeps
spots,
showing.
right?
Yeah,
Like seriously,
exactly.
like if you get a stack like this, you can just see how hard this is for your opponents. So be the bully.
Yep. Be the bully. That's right. It's there for a reason.
Yeah, it's
Um,
just there's a fine line between being the bully and spewing off all of your
Yeah,
mm,
chips.
yeah.
mhm.
I have done both.
And John, what's your sage advice for how to know when you're doing one and when you're doing the other? What's the
One you win, one you bust early.
Yeah, that's right.
That's how you know.
One thing I will say, I mean, I know this is getting long, so but one thing I will say is like from the bully's perspective, I don't always love these gigantic open shoves because of that kind of thing. And like I think we can accomplish a lot of the same thing by putting a lot of pressure by just opening a lot because
Mhm.
it forces our opponents to commit their stacks and we don't have to commit that many of our chips. And we can decide then which of these do we want to, you know, do we want to go with and which do we not. If we're just shoving every hand, then we're going to be in a spot where we've got 9-5 offsuit
Yeah.
and we're like, oh, damn it.
The thing is the time to shove is when all of the stacks behind you are like
Yes.
eight blinds or less.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
then what you don't want to do is you don't want them to have perceived fold equity. Because at those stacks, if you do a normal open raise, they don't have it. You should be calling with almost anything. Unless you're really just totally going wild. But so that's the reason why the shove is good, but that does depend upon what the other stack sizes are.
Right.
You don't want to have 80 big blinds as the big stack and shove against a 75 big blind
Right.
stack next
Good
to you.
point. Good
Even
point.
like in this spot where ImaLouigi has 22 big blinds, right?
Yeah.
And you've got an 80 big blind stack, that's still, oh, man, do I I don't know. I would just rather put the pressure on because they've got to wake up. They've got to wake up with the same kind of hand. I mean, they can flat you and they can see how it turns out, but I,
Yeah,
I
the versus the first situation where it was 80 big blinds and
yeah,
14 big blinds
then I
was the
don't mind.
big
Then
one.
we can
Yeah.
just be shoving like like a madman.
Yep.
And when dear listener, when you are the one in that position, don't feel like just because you're shoving in a couple spots, you now have to open shove every time. Like you're allowed to just look at who's still in the hand to your left and then choose your open size. So if it turns out that you can leverage the existing stacks in the game with a smaller bet, even to the point of exploitably planning to fold to shoves because you think they're almost never going to do it,
Mhm.
that's a better plan than just open shoving. And so don't feel like you have to maintain this open shoving every hand for 3 orbits to be like inscrutable. You know, sometimes it's better to just be properly calibrated in your ranges than to be inscrutable.
Yeah.
Usually being inscrutable is because you're doing something like wrong because all the easy stuff to figure out is kind of textbook. Yeah, John.
Well, I was just going to say that's a good point is that you can't be exploited by making consistent adjustments using public information.
Yes.
In other words, if it's information everyone has available, everyone knows the stack sizes of everyone else, or at least should. Everyone knows what the current blind levels are. Everyone knows what the payouts are. If you're adjusting your game based upon that information and you're doing it consistently, then you cannot be exploited based upon that.
Yeah. And
Versus if you adjust what you do based upon your cards, private information, you can be exploited on that because that could allow them to figure out that private information from you.
well said, sir. Okay, two medals in the episode today. Yeah, I think that's
Person who
exactly
knows the least gets the most medals.
John. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And we talk about this a lot when we talk about varying your open raise size, not according to the strength of your hand, but according to other factors at the table, like the average chip stack, your position, the number of runners at the table, that kind of stuff. Because you should be adjusting your strategy according to some things. They should just not be the kind of, as John says, the private information that only you have, because then you're providing your opponents an opportunity to gain some insight into that private information, which you would prefer they not have. All right, thanks, team. Well, I just have so much fun talking about this stuff with you guys every week. So I'd like to thank Stu and Kim for being in the chat and putting their comments down there. And I want to thank John and Chris, of course, for joining me, and the website AMP, and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. And all of you, dear listeners, thanks. See you soon.